Well, I certainly didn't ever expect to find myself back here. I said I was done with Black Ops 4, and at the time, I meant it. I only intended to ever make another Black Ops 4 review if something truly exceeded my expectations, or I had a lot to say about a map. This is why I opted out of reviewing Alpha Omega. I didn't enjoy the map, and I didn't really have all that much to say about it. So imagine my surprise when Tagged Toten comes along and actually reignites that creative spark a bit. Does that kinda spoil my take going forward? A little bit. Oh, and for those asking, hey Rizzo, weren't you supposed to review Buried? Yeah, I was. And I'm still working on it, but I really wanted to dive into Tagged Toten first. Now, usually this is the part where I go over what's changed since the last review, but to be honest, I tuned the hell out of Black Ops 4 after Ancient Evil, so I genuinely have no idea what Treyarch really did to the mode, besides a few things I've heard in conversation, like fixing the misaligned Hellhound spawning, which I was actually really happy to hear about. So rather than bullshit my way through a recap, let's just dive right into the cold waters of Tagged Toten and see if its icy reception was warranted. I tried fitting more puns in, but that's all I had. As we always do, let's start out with what I enjoyed about the map. First off is the most important aspect, map design. Like Blood of the Dead, Alpha Omega, and to a lesser extent, Classified, Tagged Toten takes a classic layout and builds on it with more modern sensibilities. Unlike Alpha Omega and Blood though, the layout is actually quite strong. Call of the Dead was already a well-designed map, but the addition of two-way zip lines, a 935 facility, and additional pathways that loop back into the main map make for an incredibly strong and well-flowing map layout. Now instead of having to trek back through the entire map just to get to a certain location, every part of the map seamlessly loops into another, and again, the extra fast travels help make general navigation that much easier, especially once you've constructed enough dynamite to blow open the few barricades around the map. However, I'd be lying if I said there weren't a few areas that do not transition well to the gameplay and general speed of these newer Black Ops entries. The old Juggernaut room and top floor of the lighthouse are the biggest offenders. All too often, you'll narrowly escape a crowd of zombies with 50 health remaining, only for a zombie to spawn directly in front of you and instantly down you. Those kind of deaths aren't exactly your fault, and they lead to some very frustrating moments. Which actually brings me back to an old clip from Big B himself.
When people start blaming like, oh, it's because the map's like that, or because that bad guy has too much power, that's when the problems are. Zombie map kind of balancing is more about when people blame themselves, then you're in a good place.
So I guess you could say the map kind of fails in that department. But aside from these occasionally infuriating spawn points, the overall map design is a massive improvement over the last two Aether outings. There's a ton of side content within the map. There's 2 new wonder weapons, side quests for every main wonder weapon, at least the new ones, upgradable snowballs, 15 in-game challenges from Pablo Scarecrows, each with their own reward, a side quest with a wave composed entirely of electric zombies that rewards you with a free perk, Golden Pack-a-Punch, and Samantha's music box. The standout of these, for me at least, is the addition of the Golden Pack-a-Punch. One of my least favorite things about Black Ops 4 Zombies since day one has been the fact that you need to upgrade standard weaponry 6 times, or maybe it was 5, to get a fully packed weapon. Now believe me, I get what they were trying to do with this system. Remove the need for double tap 2 every single match and change it into a gameplay feature, thus freeing up a perk slot and adding more perk variety. On paper, I'm totally up for that idea, but in execution, well, it's just not fun to stand there at the Pack-a-Punch for 6 times longer than normal. Especially when the packed power doesn't stick with the weapon when you rotate it out for another, like it did in Exo Zombies. Okay, but what does this have to do with the Golden Pack-a-Punch machine, you may be asking? Well, for the standard price of 5,000 points, Golden Pack will allow you to completely skip that tedious process and your weapon becomes fully packed. That's cool enough on its own, but what's even cooler is the fact that whenever you travel to Gold Pack's little abode, the game triggers infinitely spawning zombies until the island's timer is up and you're flung back to the ship. Now, if you've been around my channel for a while, you'll know that Area 51's timed gameplay in Moon was one of my favorite things in Zombies. I've been waiting for this kind of frenetic gameplay to come back in an official capacity for years. Even when I don't need to upgrade a weapon, whenever the opportunity arises, I'll jump over to the island just to spice up the match's gameplay. Usually this results in me getting myself killed, but hey, at least I had fun doing it.
Even if I lose, I win.
The map features a litany of wonder weapons, both old and new. The Ray Gun Mark II, Thunder Gun, Matryoshka dolls, and Monkey Bombs all return from previous maps, with the Music Box, Tundra Gun, and Wunderwaffe Sharpshooter serving as the map's new offerings. Every one of the map's wonder weapons, barring the Music Box, are in the box a la Garrod Krovi and Revelations. but there's side quests to get the new ones guaranteed if you don't want to rely on RNG, which was admittedly a problem with Revelations, especially since multiple wonder weapons were required to complete the quest. Side note, but does anyone else remember spinning the box for countless rounds just to get the Apothicon Servant or Little Arnie's? Ugh, bad times. Even better is that the side quests for the new weapons are fairly simple and straightforward, with a Thunder Gun taking the longest to obtain, which even then isn't really hard per se, it just takes a while. But by far, my favorite new weapon is Samantha's Music Box. After completing a lockdown event, a vault will open to reveal the music box. When thrown, any enemy within Samantha's area of effect at the time of her emergence will be pulled into the air and after a short charge up, instantly killed. The equipment also has a surprisingly fast recharge time, so you can throw them out with reckless abandon and do just fine. Unfortunately, any zombies that enter Samantha's AoE during her charge up animation are unaffected by the blast, which does kinda hold it back a bit. It's far from the most effective piece of lethal equipment in zombies, but sometimes the point isn't just to be effective. Style points go a long way in your murder quest, and calling in an iconic small gremlin child to eviscerate a horde of the undead is about as cool as it can get. The simplicity of the map's enemy pool. Zombies and hellhounds are the only enemies that appear in this map. Sure, there's electric zombies too, but they don't really do anything besides blur your vision a bit and look cool when they're killed. It feels very much like classic zombies, which, after Alpha Omega and the utter insanity that is Chaos, I've been kinda missing. The map also features fire zombies that explode when killed or when a player gets too close. These enemies actually do shake up the gameplay and have the potential to be very annoying additions. But unlike many annoying quest-centric zombies of the past, like napalm zombies, they only appear briefly. From a gameplay stance, their main purpose is to provide parts for the dynamite bomb, so once they're no longer needed, the game stops spawning them. I love this because if you want to keep them in the game to shake up the match and make things harder, for some fucking reason, you can do that easily. But if you don't like them, simply build one last dynamite bomb and never place it down. That'll prevent them from ever spawning in again. I really wish I could have done that with those Valkyrie drones. The final gameplay element I want to touch on real quick is the final step of the map's main quest, the Hellscape. This set piece is far more intense and fun than any boss fight Treyarch has ever made. The final holdout while escorting the Agarthan device is so damn satisfying. The way the music kicks in and swells as the reused Staff of Ra effects encroach on your position while endless swarms of zombies flood the room, that's the true good shit. Although, I'll be honest, I still like the Shadowman boss fight from Shadows. I know it's terrible, but that music track, which was actually reused in the game's campaign, is simply beautiful. With the gameplay covered, let's move on to the characters and general writing, starting with our playable crew, Victus. I'm actually surprisingly okay with seeing these guys back as playable characters after all this time. Now, as weird as it may sound to follow up that statement with what I'm about to say, I never really liked this crew all that much in the maps they're featured in. I found them to be largely annoying and whiny follow-ups to the Ultimus crew after Moon. But as Black Ops 2 season went on, Jimmy and co were able to iron out Victus's personalities a bit and focus on the few traits that worked about them in Green Run. But just as they were starting to get going, their story and growth was abruptly cut off by the awkward DLC season that was Black Ops 2 Zombies, what with Origins rebooting our classic heroes immediately after Buried. Personally, as much as I like the new characters that have come around since Buried, I've always wanted to see Victus get a second chance in the spotlight, and capitalize on the potential they exhibited in Buried and the Zombies comic released in 2017. Or 2016, I can't really remember. Well, I got exactly that. Victus has been greatly improved on, and each of them actually feel like real people. Well, heightened versions of people, like Primus, but you get what I mean. They've been through a lot together, and it translates in their in-game conversations. They still aren't the greatest of friends, but they recognize how vital it is that they work together. In this map, they are much closer to that ragtag group of civilian weirdos that I believe Jimmy and co were going for with the Broken Earth arc of Black Ops 2. The map's lore. Seeing as it's the last Aether map to be released, yeah, right. Tagter Toten makes it its mission to address as many loose ends in the timeline, be they important characters like Monty and Pablo, or smaller, largely forgotten ones like the Ghost of Buried or Harvey Yena. It ties the Ascension group and the Apothicons together, revealing that the real reason for the Siberia expedition was to research the corpse of an ancient Apothicon god resting at the bottom of the ocean. There's also audio reels around the map that explain the origins of the Ghost from Buried, how the town ended up underground in Angola, and how the original Pack-a-Punch machine came to be. Or, as it's kind of retconned to be known as, the Machine of the Angels. As for the more important stuff, the radios further developed the character of Dr. Monty and finally confirmed the headcanon I've had since Revelations, and that is that Dr. Monty is not really an evil being at all. Just ignore the fact that he vored Maxis. At the end of the day, Monty's interests are the same as Primus: find a way to continue life. The only way he knew how to was to continue the cycle after the war for Agartha and Revelations. Sure, he knew that the multiverse would inevitably begin to fracture and crumble the moment that Group 935 began experimentation with 115, but continuing the cycle was the only way to guarantee his safety and the safety of the children. Richtofen too was afraid of his end and the end of his best friends, hence why he always diverts from Monty's plan and secures the blood vials from Alcatraz. Both parties were afraid of dying and were unable to make the sacrifice that Nikolai made. And with that, I think it's time to finally talk about that ending. But Rizzo, you're still in the good section. Yeah, I know, but bear with me. I have a lot to say about this ending. Now, I'm gonna sound like the internet's favorite filmmaker, Ryan Johnson, when I say this, but Tagder Toten subverts the expectation of the viewer and the characters within the story. We all expected this massive finale where we fight an Apotheconian army like Revelations, but then all of our heroes simply die in a forest. Many players suspect that this wasn't supposed to be how it went, but budget cuts, and the fact that they clearly couldn't get Malcolm McDowell back to voice one of the most important characters in the story led to a massive last-minute rewrite. Not a bad theory, and if you want to believe that's what happened, I certainly won't fight you on it. Black Ops 4 and Treyarch in general are no stranger to weird behind-the-scenes nonsense. But my personal headcanon is that this was always supposed to be how it kinda went. Nikolai was simply lying from the start. They were never meant to fight the Great War. This was merely his way of rallying everyone together. He knew that they would all die in that forest. The Chronorium showed him that he had to be the one to do it after Richtofen passed the burden. Nikolai had to create a believable cause for them all to rally around, so that once they were all together, and Victus got him what he needed, he could kill them in their sleep. It's kinda cruel, and it won't satisfy everyone, but it's kinda what had to happen. But what about Dr. Monty? What about the Shadow Man? The Great War? Why did everyone have to die? Well, if you're a bit confused, I understand. So, allow me to explain to the best of my ability. Dr. Monty. The only thing about this entire map that feels rewritten completely was this character's role. I feel like even though this ending is probably what was always supposed to happen, there was supposed to be a confrontation with Monty and our heroes between the intro and outro, based on this line.
Monty told us the truth. Our journey is the very reason this madness exists.
Like, what are you even talking about, Nikolai? You guys have literally never met him. That line seems like a holdover from an earlier draft of the script, before they realized they couldn't get McDowell back. 4 months ago, the Shadow Man. Well, this one is pretty simple. He was stuck in the summoning key. His grand scheme was based on the actions taken during the cycle. Get trapped by the Morgue City cast, then have Richtofen unknowingly bring him to Agartha, where he can have a grand old time with his Apothecon pals. But since the cycle was broken, it was probably just chilling in the key like, shit. The risk I took was calculated. But man, am I bad at math. As for the Great War, well, the war, regardless of the fact that they win every time, is meaningless. Sure, the Apothecons always lose the battle, but by that time, they've already won the war. They will always hide the MPD on the moon and send 115 off to countless realities before their initial imprisonment in the Dark Aether. Because of this, humanity will always find 115, and their experiments will always draw the Apothecons into their dimensions, which always leads Richtofen to steal the summoning key from the Morgue City cast in hopes of securing his better tomorrow. But as we all know, the Shadow Man is always in that key, which leads to the Apothecons being able to access the Aether in Revelations, which always leads to the Blood Vial paradox, which leads to Monty continuing the cycle so that he can continue living, and everything loops from there. So to make a long story short, fighting the Great War, even though it would have made for a really great set piece, is ultimately a pointless endeavor. This is really the only way it can end. Maxis actually hints to this in Alpha Omega.
The ramifications for destroying Agartha are not yet clear. After all, it's interwoven into the fabric of all realities, meaning its destruction would impact all of existence. It could very well reset all of time and space.
Look, just because I didn't really like the map doesn't mean I completely ignored it. Anyway, what he essentially says is that by destroying the Aether, a chain reaction will be set off which will ultimately lead to the destruction of Element 115 and the multiverse itself. Okay, but why do our heroes have to die then? Well, Samantha mentions in this map that when Richtofen created the elemental shard, he bound the very essence of Dempsey, Nikolai, Takeo, and himself to the Aether. Now, one cannot exist without the other, which explains why there's so many versions of these four across time. The Aether is a living being of sorts. It knows it has to keep them alive to continue its own existence. So when Nikolai destroys the multiverses and kills his friends, everything holding the Aether together is now gone, leading it to finally be plunged into the place below creation. And because Samantha and Eddie are both innocent, uncorrupted souls, they're able to leave the dark Aether and ascend back to a pure reality. Holy shit, that was a mouthful. Now, while I personally found this kind of interesting, satisfying, and logical, I completely understand how it can be viewed as an unsatisfying cop-out. If you hate this ending, I get it. It's far from perfect. Like, why did Nikolai have Samantha shoot him? I know he says, you have to be the one to do it, but why? The story doesn't give us any reason why Sam has to be the one to do it. Instead, it just comes off as needlessly dark and mean-spirited. Like when Great War Richtofen essentially told Primus Richtofen to fuck himself in Blood of the Dead's outro, instead of sympathizing with his plight, but realizing that his other self needs to die.
I wish I could tell you I was sorry, Edward. But I'm not.
They're the same person, they've gone through the same story and share the same fear of death. This literally makes zero sense. Why is he such an asshole? Okay, let's get back to Tag before I have a fat guy rage attack. But despite my initial disappointment of not seeing these elements come together for the finale, in the end, Monty, Shadowman, the Keepers, or even the Apothecons weren't really what I feel like the writers wanted to focus on. They wanted to focus on the internal struggles of the Primus cast, and whether or not you feel like it worked, or hell, if that was even the right approach to take, I feel that this ending is in keeping with the characterization and theme set up in Black Ops 3 and 4. Now, before we move on, I want to talk about the final shot real quick. After the Agarthan device destroys the multiverse and Sam executes Nikolai, her and Eddie are shown walking towards a white light, while we hear what Primus and Ultimus would have wanted to do, had they been allowed to continue their existence. I'll be honest, this bit, combined with the ever-amazing score from Brian Toohey, kinda choked me up a bit. Now, I didn't ugly cry like I did during the end credits of Infinite Warfare's campaign, but it's still really damn effective. It's bittersweet to end with one last send-off for our heroes, as Samantha and Eddie walk off towards an uncertain future. And if I'm honest, I hope we never find out for certain where they went, primarily because we don't need to, because in retrospect, the entire point of Black Ops 3 and 4 was that the only way to truly secure a better tomorrow was to simply let go of the present. I think that continuing the story past this point in any way, shape, or form would kinda invalidate that message and the sacrifices of Primus and Ultimus. Okay, that better tomorrow line was really damn cheesy, but I just couldn't help myself. Another thing I love about this shot is that you control Samantha and Eddie's movement. This works really well from a meta perspective in that, just like the characters in the story, you, the player, have to be the one to let them go. This little decision is frankly a stroke of genius, as it truly makes you feel like you're the one finally letting go of these characters and stories that have meant so much to us over the last decade. Now, is it possible that I'm overthinking this? Oh yeah. But for as much of a hard time as I give Jason and Craig over their story choices with Aether, they do occasionally pull out some really great stuff. So maybe I'm not too far off after all. Now with all the good covered, let's list a few small things that I didn't really have a section for, but are worth mentioning regardless. The tribute to Mr. Romero. This one is just really sweet.
Whose glasses are these?
A great man, Sammy. He shined a light in the darkest corners of our souls.
Snowballs. Yeah, this one might sound a bit weird, but the snowball and fire zombie mechanics are actually really intelligently designed. When I first picked up snowballs and they struggled to kill on round 10, I thought, okay, if there's a step where you have to kill zombies with these, then it's going to be impossible on high rounds. Well, apparently Treyarch thought the same thing. So they scripted the snowballs to be an instant kill on any round if you manage to hit the head, which means you can always get your hands on dynamite, regardless of your round number. That's a really smart quality of life decision. The frost textures on the Tundra gun are a nice touch. The SOS message challenge has a snowball stuck in one of the letters, which can subtly clue in the player on how to complete the challenge, without the need for an expository tutorial. The secret area. On its own, this just seems like a neat Easter egg that shows how fruitless Pablo's attempts at escape were, but in reality, this is actually a massive meme. The skybox shows Mars in the sky and plays the loading screen music from Shangri-La, giving a wink and a nudge to the old crackpot theory that Shangri-La is actually on Mars. I always love these little Easter eggs that acknowledge community memes, like the last gen Richtofen jump scare in Classified. Now it's finally time to start talking about what I disliked about the map. And for those who enjoy the map like myself, don't worry, we won't be here long. As much as I did like the general story the map told, many plot threads and Chekhov's guns were completely dropped. For example, the Ultimus will prevail writings in Classified, Nikolai's soul being needed to defeat Dr. Monty, Peter McCain's unfinished business, Dr. Monty being aware of the group's actions, and many more threads just completely disappear out of the story at the last minute. Now, it can be argued that these plot points weren't necessary to touch on to get to the ending of our hero's journey, so they intentionally scrapped them. But on the other hand, setting things up to simply ignore them is just messy writing. If they weren't going to be essential to the endgame, why even bring them up? Unless the entire point was to shove as many red herrings into the story as possible like Last Jedi, then okay, I guess you got us? The main quest. After Ancient Evil, and surprisingly Alpha Omega, I was convinced that Treyarch finally nailed down how to make a fun and accessible main quest. But Tagged or Toten's is just kinda meh. While it's not overtly terrible like Revelations, it's not really all that good either. It's just kinda bland and inoffensive. It really has a been there done that feeling to it. Do something for one of your newfound buddies in the map. Go on a scavenger hunt that requires a YouTube guide or 3. Listen to some dialogue. And then there's the last step, which ranges from a poorly designed boss fight, or an ending with a bunch of voiceover, or in this map's case, the most badass escort mission in Call of Duty Zombies. Aside from that last step, I was hoping for something with a bit more oomph, I suppose. Like, let's compare it to some of the most recent finales with slash budgets and teams. Infinite Warfare ended with what is arguably still the best fight in Zombies, Mephistopheles. And more recently, Nazi Zombies had a massive battle with the undead king of an ancient civilization. Now, whether this was a budgetary thing, or the quest was intentionally designed to be smaller scale to fit the map's theme that not everything necessarily has to end in a massive fight. Sometimes it just ends with quiet character choices. Well, that's up to you, I suppose. And lastly, yeah, I know, I said we wouldn't be here long, I really like this map. The new wonder weapons are a bit disappointing. I give Alpha Omega a lot of shit for reusing the Ray Gun Mark II frame for its new elemental effects, but those weapons were, at the very least, a lot of fun to use. Especially the infinite ammo one. I know it's basic bitchy, but that one was a lot of fun to use. But back to Tagged or Toten. The new Wunder Sniper, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, feels, looks, and plays like a clumsy assortment of spare parts thrown together at the last minute. And not in a charming way like the Weapons of the Broken Earth arc, or Marie's Ripsaw design from Nazi Zombies. The futuristic receiver of the weapon clashes so heavily with the elements brought over from the classic Wunderwaffe design, leading to a design that feels more like something you'd see in a custom map with no artistic direction. Then there's the Tundra Gun, which is also kinda meh. The idea of a more tactical thunder gun that can be used up close or at a range is kind of interesting, but the fact that it deals heavy splash damage to the player greatly limits its practical application. So unless you're running bomb stoppers, I really wouldn't recommend picking this one up. Actually, never mind. Post-original voiceover Rizzo here, and yeah, the Tundra Gun is completely worthless past like round 35. For some reason, it becomes a 2-hit kill. I understand the thought process behind most gameplay choices in this game, even if I don't necessarily agree with them, but this one, I genuinely don't get it. The weapon was already less effective than the Thunder Gun due to its splash damage and projectile nature, so the killing potential being limited even more makes literally no sense to me. With a few bad things covered, let's move on to my favorite part, the nitpicks. See, I told you we wouldn't be on the bad for long. So, to start out with the nitpicks, let's go back to Blood of the Dead for just a moment. In the ending, Great War Richtofen freed the souls of Alcatraz using the Firestaff crystal to purify the land. So it kinda begs the question, how the heck are zombies even here to chase Victus down in the first place? The copy-pasted zombie Richtofen face in the cutscene looks hilariously out of place and lazy. The newly drawn faces look just fine, but this one looks amazing in all the wrong ways. The Thunder Gun has a new anim set, and all of them are actually quite nice. Except the firing animation. Good Christ, this is really bad. It has no oomph behind it, and honestly feels unfinished. Let's compare them real quick. Black Ops 3's felt great to shoot, but Black Ops 4's is just kind of pathetic. And I honestly can't believe someone said, yeah, this is okay, ship it, who cares, we have $25 to finish this map, just get it out the door. On the topic of the Thunder Gun, the Tundra Gun's control box emissive color remains unchanged. They simply hide the fact that they didn't change it with a blue effect. This can only really be seen when switching to an empty Tundra Gun and doesn't actually impact anything. But hey, this is the nitpick segment after all. When clearing the fire from the ship's pack-a-punch area, it absolutely destroys your frame rate on console. When Samantha appears in-game, her hair is tied in a ponytail, but in the forest, her hair is messy and unkempt. While on the topic of Samantha's model, her eyelids were pulled down to help give her an angry expression, but her eyelash mesh wasn't moved accordingly, so now they just stick through the top of her eyelids. Her height is also wildly inconsistent. In the cutscenes for this map and Alpha Omega, she's shown to be a good half a foot taller than Eddie, which helps solidify her role as his protector. But in the final shot, she's back to being much shorter than him. In the Great War segments, the Margwa's back tentacles are not posed. Actually, I want to nerd out about this cutscene in general, so just give me a minute or two. Anyway, this is likely because the renders used for the Great War segments in Alpha Omega and Tagged Toten were probably taken from Treyarch's asset property editor. From playing around with the Black Ops 3 variant a bit, and modders who are much more informed than I, please correct me if I'm wrong. The Margwa's tentacles are animated through additive animations that are scripted to play on top of their normal animations in-game. However, since Ape doesn't support additive animations in the preview, the Margwa tentacles naturally have no animation. As for the lack of glow on the Margwas and Furies, well, that's probably because used gameplay intensity wasn't ticked on their emissive textures when the snapshots were taken. As for the T-posing Apothicon Furies, well, that's just pure laziness. The shield's buy trigger clips through the top of the ceiling, letting you purchase it from above. Did the pickup sound for the brains really have to be this loud?
There's so much noise in my head, I can't even think!
So, overall, Tagged Toten is far from the perfect finale we all wanted, but amidst the occasionally messy writing, dropped plot threads, and painfully obvious shoestring budget, there's something special. An ending I really didn't expect, that forgoes the usual crowd-pleasing epic finale and ends on a rather bleak small-scale note. As for the map itself, it takes a classic and genuinely builds on it to create an experience that truly feels like a reimagining. As we've discussed though, this isn't without its faults either. Some of the spawn points and corridor sizes are simply unfair on occasion. But despite its problems, and the fact that there's much stronger competition in this game alone, it's still an experience that I genuinely enjoyed. Well, that's all for today. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, you can check out the playlist in the description to watch my previous long-form reviews. And for those of you wondering, don't worry, the next review will be buried. I actually got quite far into the script, and even started editing some segments. But Tag You're It surprised the hell out of me, so it took precedence. Just like the World War II weapon guides, and the interview with Cameron and Jason. But now, nothing stands in my way, so I'll be resuming work on that very soon, and hopefully, I'll have it out soon. So thank you all for watching and putting up with my wildly inconsistent upload schedule. I really hope you enjoyed watching, but before we close the curtains, let's end it off with one last tribute to Aether. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care.
As we leave this life behind, it is my hope that you know one thing beyond any doubt. You are more than just my allies, my brothers in arms. You were my friends.